Hardly anybody can resist the taste of chocolate. And for those chocoholics out there, brownies are the perfect medicine. You know how they're like, crispy on the outside and soft heart on the inside. And what's more, they're really easy to make, certainly when it comes to the basic version. But I've got some more creative versions ready for you too. Take your pick, the traditional chocolate brownie squares, or the nuts and caramel version. Or, if you're really feeling festive, a genuine brownie cake with whipped cream and raspberries. It only takes a few ingredients to make the perfect brownie. Of course, it all starts with chocolate. I need 200 grams of really dark chocolate. I'm immediately taking this glass bowl because we're going to melt the chocolate, obviously. I'm melting it together with the butter, of which I use 130 grams. $130 grams, which I add in small pieces so everything can melt evenly. I'm opting for the traditional way to melt the chocolate and Stork, which in my opinion is still the best way, or bain-marie. A large pot filled with hot water, our glass bowl on top of that. And this is ready for the stove without the risk of burning anything. Now, while this is cooking, I'm continuing the rest of our recipe. I need eggs for that, 3, and that's about 150 grams. The eggs go in whole. I don't really need to beat them. I'll just be mixing them with 130 grams of vanilla sugar. In goes the sugar. Now beat them a little. And let's see how the chocolate's doing. The bain-marie is doing its work and the water is just about close to boiling. The bowl is really heating up and the chocolate and the Stork are melting nicely. This way you get great liquid chocolate, which we can simply add to our egg mix. Now, just to make sure, the chocolate shouldn't be too hot, because if it is, you could end up cooking your eggs. And we don't want that to happen until they've hit the oven, do we? Now, obviously, we're not spilling a drop here, so every corner gets a wipe. We're only in the scrambled egg with chocolate phase for the moment. So we're adding some flour. Not that much, 50 grams will do. And this is when I add a secret ingredient, a bit of almond powder. 20 grams this time. Flour-wise, don't use self-raising flour in this case. We're doing everything we can to make a tender brownie. And I didn't beat the eggs thoroughly, and I'm not using self-raising flour because we want a brownie that's nice and sticky. 50 grams, and I'm stirring in the flour carefully. And because we're dealing with a rather firm consistency, because of the chocolate, there's no real point in sifting the flour. If you should bump into little lumps, the chocolate will make sure everything mixes together fine. Then, with the almond powder we added, the tenderness and stickiness of our cookies will certainly be guaranteed. The dough for our brownies is completely ready. We only need to preheat the oven. Not too hot in this case, 170 degrees Celsius is more than enough. This dough is ready to hit the oven, and I'm not using the traditional baking tin, which is a little bit higher. I'm taking a cake tin designed for brownies. And it's not that special though. It's got lower sides and a wider surface. because later on we want these nice and flat brownies. Alright, just to make sure, we'll grease it a bit and add a little sheet of baking paper. Now, only the width of the baking tin should be covered. Now, don't mind the sides. Just add a bit of Stork. Not too much, just enough to make sure the paper isn't going anywhere. Now, fold the borders, and it's ready to receive the dough. And the quantities we used in this recipe are just about enough to make sure we can cover the entire bottom with about 2 centimeters of dough. Now, because we didn't use self-raising flour, it won't rise any higher than this. Now, it's only the eggs that will inflate just a little bit. And we'll smooth out the top, and the brownie mixture is ready to place in the oven at a temperature of about 170 degrees Celsius. Yep, meanwhile the kitchen has been filling with the smell of chocolate. And you can't smell it, but I can assure you, yum yum yum. All right. Here we have the traditional chocolate brownie, but you guys opted for the version with caramel and nuts. So I'll immediately get started on the caramel. And I'll begin with a little splash of water on the stove. Add quite an amount of sugar, and then the procedure of caramelizing can begin. First, the sugar dissolves into the water, becoming what you would call sugar syrup. I'm using a pan big enough so I can add the nuts later on, and because we're dealing with sugar here, make sure your pan can cope with the high sugar temperature. So, a cast iron pan or an old one from the shed. And while the sugar is further caramelizing, we can already cut the brownie. Not into the traditional squares like we're used to when it comes to brownies, but into slivers this time. I'm making something like chocolate bars with nuts, so the baking paper makes it very easy for our brownie to come out. I'm removing the sides, and you'll immediately notice the lovely texture of the brownie. I'm carefully cutting it into nice slivers now, and let's say about 1.5 centimeters wide. And then I'm laying them down on their sides and checking our sugar in between, which is starting to look a bit more golden brown. It's of course exactly that combination of tender brownie and crispy caramel and nuts which makes this sliver so special. And now, stay alert when it comes to the caramel, because, yep, look, in the meantime, the colour has changed into this gorgeous golden brown. And I have to be clear about this. Be careful. Make sure the kids are out of the kitchen, because this searing hot sugar is perilous. If a drop lands on your hand, it won't do you any good. And now, there's no time to waste. We're adding the nuts, a traditional unsalted nut mix to the caramel, and wrap the caramel nicely around the nuts. And then we really have to hurry. Now with 2 spoons, we'll scoop the caramel and nuts onto the brownie. We're not piling up the nuts too high, because our caramel will soon harden. And then it will not only taste good, it could also break the odd tooth. Now if you notice the caramel is starting to solidify, just put the pan back on the stove for a moment, softening the caramel again and making it easier to work with. And if you want, you can go crazy with the rest of the caramel. And we're covering it with a spider web. And this way, we can get this really nutritious sliver of brownie with nuts and caramel. My cup of tea. All right, enjoy.